Greetings and welcome to the Arizona Revival History Channel. My name is Dale Gilmore, and the person you are looking at is Ed Schieffelin, a soldier and prospector who founded the city of Tombstone. Today we want to look briefly at life in Tombstone, Arizona, like the average citizen or churchgoer would perceive it. Hollywood has created a mythic picture of what life was like in the 1880s. At least for people whose perceptions today would maybe look at it, we'd say, was that real or were they myths? How safe was it to live in Tombstone in the years 1880 to 1882? Excuse me, the years of our inquiry. Were there perpetual gunfights and killings on the streets? Or was the OK Corral an anomaly? I want to suggest that the OK Corral was an anomaly when you look at the last 141 years of Tombstone's history. But there was a 3-year period when many things happened which caused great anxiety and danger to the citizens of Tombstone. And I want to bring out 11 things that contributed to unusually high tensions in Tombstone between 1880 and 1882. Let's begin with a little background first. Ed Schieffelin, who was a scouting party soldier looking for the Chiricahua Apaches, happened to wander off and discovered silver in 1877. And within 2 years, the city of Tombstone, Arizona had sprung up in the region of that silver mine. Almost immediately, Tombstone begins to become a typical western mining town. That leads me to my first thing, I guess, the thing that caused tension and anxiety among people in Tombstone. In 1879, the city of Tombstone was being overrun by prospectors, entrepreneurs, gamblers, and unfortunately, shysters of different varieties, all coming to Tombstone to make a quick buck or two or strike it rich. With all the growth and change, proper government was not established immediately, and law and order were not high on everyone's minds. So people did what they could get away with. There were always fights surrounding stakes claimed while mining for the silver, and in town, gunfire could be heard periodically in saloons and gambling halls. The second thing that would cause anxiety in those years, the cowboy element that lived around Tombstone were not legitimate farmers or ranchers, but basically cattle rustlers and criminals. They had been making excursions into nearby Mexico, rustling cattle and horses from Mexican ranches that were along the border. Mexican authorities had clamped down on these raids. Now they began to raid ranches around Tombstone. They were also robbing stagecoaches, and tensions were mounting in Tombstone over the lack of law enforcement. With the increase in the number of saloons and restaurants in Tombstone, all wanting to serve beef. There was a ready market for wrestlers who had wrestled ill-gotten beef from farms that they did not own. The third event or person that caused anxiety and tension in Tombstone was Geronimo. The Apache chief had just broken out of San Carlos Reservation further north and was back to killing people, robbing stagecoaches, attacking farms and ranches, and rustling cattle and horses. It was in the summer of 1881 when he headed towards Tombstone and struck some nearby farms. A posse was formed in Tombstone to pursue the renegade Apache leader, but they failed to locate him. Yet the ruthlessness of these raids caused alarm among the citizenry of Tombstone. Geronimo would kill you, maim you, or if he wanted, kidnap you. The fourth thing that began to cause concern in the city was when government finally was set up in Tombstone. Some of the first laws in the books banned guns and rifles in town. Now these laws were not unusual. They were adopted also by cities like Dodge City, Kansas, Abilene, Texas, and Deadwood, South Dakota. So on April 19, 1881, Tombstone Ordinance Number 9 was issued concerning carrying deadly weapons in Tombstone. You could not carry a weapon openly or hide one under your clothing. The ordinance also included bowie knives and dirks. Dirks were basically daggers. Everyone recognized the need to own a firearm or several firearms when you were living in that territory in that time. But when you came to town, you had to turn them in to a livery or a saloon while you were in town. For most law-abiding citizens, that was fine, but the cowboys and other criminal elements in town would not turn their weapons over unless forced to. The fifth thing that would cause anxiety in these years was the fact that most of the initial buildings in Tombstone were built out of wood, and so fire was always a danger. Unfortunately, the first major fire to hit Tombstone swept through the city on June 22, 1881. More than 60 businesses along Allen Street were destroyed before the fire was put out. Most of these businesses were able to rebuild in about 6 months' time. Now there was a second fire about a year later, which we will mention later. This fire pretty much wiped out all of Allen Street. And pictured here is the first firehouse manned by volunteers, started back in 1880. The second picture is taken of the remains of the second fire in 1882. Again, this was a dangerous time to be living or working on Allen Street in Tombstone. Well, number 6 is probably the most famous of the causes of fear and concern in the city in 1881. It was the showdown between the Earp brothers and the criminal cowboy element. This showdown ended in a gunfight outside the OK Corral. The build-up to this fight had started months before, as the Earp brothers and Sheriff Behan, all of them were the local law enforcement, had begun enforcing the gun ban in town. And the criminal cowboy element did not want to be disarmed. There were other political tensions and personal offenses which we won't get into. Some of them involved accusations about stagecoach robberies and so on. But events on October 26 brought tensions to a boiling point. At least two of the cowboys had been up drinking all night prior to the shootout. Now, just to clarify the responsibility for law enforcement in town, Virgil Earp was the U.S. Marshal and had recently been made Marshal in the city of Tombstone. Virgil had deputized his brother Morgan and Wyatt as deputy marshals previously, and that very day had deputized Doc Holliday too. At about 1 o'clock that afternoon, Virgil had encountered a very drunk Ike Clanton on the street carrying a weapon. Virgil had pistol whipped him, causing him to fall on the ground. Now, pistol whipping entailed hitting a person on the head or the neck with the butt of a rifle or handgun. It could cause a concussion or bleeding, with the person usually falling on the ground. Virgil disarmed Ike Clanton, and he and Wyatt took him to Justice of the Peace Wallace for a court hearing regarding his gun carrying in town. Meanwhile, two more cowboys had ridden into town, failing to deposit their guns in accordance with the law. After the hearing, Wyatt noticed that Tom McClary was walking around town with a gun. He confronted him, pistol whipping Tom twice. He hit him twice with a gun from behind, leaving him on the ground and bleeding. Now let me just inject here a personal opinion. I am not sure that pistol whipping was part of normal law enforcement procedure in that time. But these two events just stirred the bad blood between the cowboys and the Earps to a boiling point. Now, two of the cowboys were still armed, and eyewitnesses reported to Virgil and his brothers that they saw the cowboys at a store buying cartridges for their gun belts. They had been making threats about wanting to kill the Earp brothers in the past, and they continued to do so even that day. Virgil Earp decided he needed to disarm the cowboys, who were still armed, and he rounded up Wyatt and Morgan, his brothers, and collected Doc Holliday to confront the cowboys about having weapons in town. Virgil had heard that the cowboys were seen heading for the OK Corral, so that is where the four of them went. Arriving at the back side of the OK Corral, they confronted 6 cowboys. They were the 2 Clanton brothers, Ike and Billy, the 2 McClary brothers, Tom and Frank, Billy Claiborne, and the 6th one was Wes Fuller. Now, no one knows who fired first. When the shooting started, Ike Clanton ran up to Wyatt Earp and told him he was unarmed and did not want to fight. Reportedly, Wyatt told him, "Go to fighting or get away." Clanton took off running into the Fly boarding house, which was right next door, and was not wounded in the firefight. Billy Claiborne and Wes Fuller also ran from the scene of the shooting once it started. Virgil Earp testified later at the murder trial that when he saw the cowboys, he said, "Throw up your hands. I want your guns. I have come to disarm you." Testimony at that trial that followed about what happened was all over the board. However, we know the outcome of the shootout. Tom and Frank McClary were dead, and Billy Clanton was dead. Virgil and Morgan Earp were slightly wounded, as was Doc Holliday. Wyatt Earp emerged unhurt, which is amazing considering people were firing weapons at each other within 6 feet of each other. Now these pictures are of a robotic action figures that the city of Tombstone has put up recreating the event. This isn't exactly the way the fight happened, but it is close and it's located in the area where the fight happened. Number 7 of the events that would cause some concern in the city happened on December 28th of 1881. The Cowboys sought revenge against the Earp brothers, and Marshal Virgil Earp was crossing Allen Street and was shot in the back with 3 shotgun rounds. The attack did not kill him, but left him permanently maimed, shattering his left arm and elbow. Then the next year, March 18th of 1882, Virgil and Wyatt's younger brother Morgan was killed in another ambush. He and Wyatt were playing pool in a saloon, and shots were fired through the window of the back door, killing Morgan and just missing Wyatt. Now all these events were quite unsettling to the townspeople. Number 9 of unsettling events began 3 days later after the killing of Morgan Earp. Wyatt put together a posse of men and began what is called the Earp Vendetta Ride. Wyatt had come to the conclusion that he could not get justice in the courts and that it was up to him to exact justice by pursuing and killing those he thought were involved in killing his brother and maiming another brother. Now this event did not entail gunfights in Tombstone, but there was always the threat of violence and retaliation around this vendetta ride. A little while later, number 10 occurred. As we mentioned earlier, the second fire in Tombstone's downtown district engulfed most of the businesses on Allen Street on May 25th, 1882. There were no reports of loss of life in the fire, but this only added to the stress of the other events of that year. And finally, number 11. The final danger to hit Tombstone was in the winter of 1882 when the town was hit with a smallpox scare. Everyone in town rushed to the hospital, that's pictured here, to get vaccinated against smallpox. Well, knowing that 1881 was an unusually violent and troubling year, was that normal life in Tombstone? Statistics on deaths in Tombstone in those 2 years, actually 3 years, are difficult to come by. I read somewhere, unfortunately did not copy the source, that in 1881 in the city of Tombstone there were 5 deaths by gunshot. 3 of them were the casualties of the OK Corral shootout. There are other statistics in an article in the History Stack Exchange that found that between 1879 and 1884, a 5-year period, there were 52 people who died by gunshot, knife, or some sort of blunt instrument. That averages to a little more than 10 people per year for the 5-year period. That's looking at the population of Tombstone being somewhere around 10,000. So obviously, as you look at this, that means there were not street fights happening 2 to 3 times a week. Now we know that one church existed at the time of the OK Corral shootout. That church was Sacred Heart of Jesus Catholic Church, begun in 1879, and with the help of Nellie Cashman were in a building they dedicated on January 1 of 1881. They then built a larger church which they dedicated sometime in 1882. St. Paul's Episcopal Church was meeting in the courtroom of the Miners Exchange building until they dedicated their new building in July of 1882. They are the oldest Protestant church in Arizona. Now, John Donahue, Tombstone's current marketing director, and Sonny Quanchan, Tombstone's international tourism director, were kind enough to meet with me back in May of this year. And as I was recording some conversation, here is John's assessment of the mindset of citizens and church people in 1881 and 1882.
What did people think then? They were religious compared to us. St. Paul's, like the other churches, had 2 services on Sunday, a daytime one and an evening one. And then on Easter, they had like 3. People loved going to church. Today, people like me just sort of sit there. But back then, they were very interested in what the ministers had to say. Here's our minister.
Hi, glad to meet you.
Heather Rose. And
I'm Dale Gilmore, and this is my wife Kathy.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you both.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And he's starting a YouTube about Arizona revival and how people thought back in the day about churches, how they felt. I was telling him churches had 2 or 3 services. People loved going to church. They were interested in it. There was no TV. There was no YouTube.
Less things pulling for people's attention.
Yes. Now, you asked about how did they feel about gambling and prostitution.
And the violence and the shooting. I mean, I'm just curious.
Yes.
You know, you have the OK Corral. Were they appalled at that? Were
No,
they kind of
irritated.
saying irritated? Okay.
There were sporadic shootings in 1881
Yep.
that ended up leading to the gunfight. People, the records we have in their diaries of people who were what we call normal, was that they were irritated. Stop this. We don't need people running around shooting. Gambling was accepted.
Okay.
It was not.
That was the sign at the time.
It was the way it
It
was.
was just the way life was.
Prostitution in western towns was accepted. However, the highway here, Fremont Street, was a dividing line. Good people were on this side.
Okay.
Everybody else was
Lived
over there.
over there.
Well,
Okay.
explain, at that time, Fremont was the main street.
Yes,
Okay.
on the main street. And so it. Okay. Today, if we ran into some young woman who was a prostitute and enjoying it and making a lot of money, a lot of people would try to reform her. Back then, no. Things were different.
It appears the church folk and the citizens of Tombstone accepted the saloons and the drinking and the gambling and the prostitution, which honestly surprised me and which we will talk about in a future blog. However, they did not tolerate the shootouts or the assassinations or the cattle rustling. Now, the video we are watching is of men on Allen Street who are there to portray a shootout every afternoon, and they are trying to convey that tension for a gunfight is building with other men standing on the other end of Allen Street. Now, since Hollywood has portrayed Tombstone as a Wild West shoot-'em-up type city, Tombstone, it seems, needs or feels it needs to keep the myth alive to draw tourists. But was it really that way? Pastor Peabody knew of the OK Corral shootings, but upon arriving in Tombstone and walking around the city for the first time, he wrote to a friend back east, "This is more of a place than I expected." He said he was impressed with the layout of the city and with the quality of some of the homes. He also made the comment that he was expecting something wilder and woollier, that he was impressed by the lack of rowdyism in the throng of what he called loafers, miners and gamblers out on the streets. He goes on to write, "I am surprised to find so many well-educated and refined persons, both men and women, here." I'm going to conclude today by asking all of us to pray for Tombstone and the citizens of that city. In speaking with my two hosts, they said they know of no revival that ever impacted any church in Tombstone. No revival that ever impacted any church in Tombstone. Let's pray that that dry streak ends soon and that revival fire burns through that city in the very near future. Well, I have a couple more videos on Tombstone that I want to make, but this is all for today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to know when the other videos are released. Click like if you like this video. Comments are always welcome below, or send them to ArizonaRevivalHistory@gmail.com. ArizonaRevivalHistory@gmail.com. And I'm Dale Gilmore, and until next time, may God bless you all.